Now, with the recent release of episodes 7 and 8, we finally got what seems to be confirmation of the Ripper's voice. But here's the thing, what if I told you this episode actually hid even bigger clues? Ones that flat out reveal who the New York Ripper really is. And what if I also told you the show has been building towards a reveal that absolutely no one online has been expecting? In today's video, we're diving into the theory that the Ripper isn't just one person at all, but two. And once you see the evidence, you'll realize it makes way more sense than you'd think. When episode 7 dropped, one of the first things that immediately stood out to fans was the eerie reveal of the Ripper's voice. For the first time, we actually got to hear what this killer sounds like, and the show made sure to deliver it in the creepiest way possible. Instead of showing us another kill right off the bat, the voice was presented in a way that feels almost supernatural, as if it lingers in the minds of his victims long after the crime is over. It's less about the physical act of murder in that moment and more about the psychological scars he leaves behind. The victims aren't just hurt, they're haunted. Even now, the voice echoes through them like a ghost, reminding us that the Ripper's presence stretches far beyond the bodies he leaves behind. And yet, despite that chilling reveal, there is a strange catch. The Ripper himself has been oddly inactive in the present timeline, almost as if he's gone underground, biding his time and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. That silence isn't comforting, it's terrifying, because killers like this don't stop, they wait. And it's exactly this pause in inactivity that sent the internet into a frenzy. The moment the voice was revealed, one name started circulating again and again: Jonah Mitchell. Yes, that Jonah, the son of Arthur Mitchell, better known as the Trinity Killer. For longtime fans of Dexter, Jonah has always been a lingering question mark. His traumatic childhood, his violent outbursts, and most notably his brief return in season 7 made him one of those few loose threads the series never fully tied up. People point to the fact that during that return, Jonah was shown wielding a hook in the store he was working in, and fans have latched onto that moment as supposed foreshadowing of his eventual evolution into the New York Ripper. Combine that with the eerie similarity between the Ripper's voice and Jonah's voice from the original series, and you can start to see why this theory gained traction so quickly online. On the surface, it sounds convincing. Jonah has the backstory, the trauma, the means, and now maybe the voice. But when you actually take a step back, the cracks in this theory start to show. First off, let's address the weapon. In Resurrection, Prater, the character we've seen closest tied to the Ripper, was shown holding a much longer weapon, something far more complex than just a simple hook. The framing of those scenes make it clear that his weapon of choice is designed to inflict a very specific type of damage, and a hook alone just doesn't match what we've been shown. To reduce it all to Jonah used a hook once, so he must be the Ripper, oversimplifies things way too much. Then there's the location issue. Jonah Mitchell was last seen in the original series living far from New York, trying to piece together some semblance of a normal life. For him to suddenly resurface as a full-blown serial killer across the country feels out of place. Sure, characters can relocate, but narratively, it makes very little sense for Jonah to end up in New York out of all places, and for the show to drop that twist out of nowhere without any real build-up. It would feel cheap rather than shocking. And finally, the biggest flaw in the theory is the voice itself. Yes, there are similarities between Jonah's voice and the Ripper's voice, but let's not forget the simplest explanation. We're dealing with a killer who thrives on manipulation, misdirection, and psychological terror. The use of a voice changer would not only make perfect sense, but would also fit the Ripper's entire persona as someone who blurs identity and strikes from the shadows. Relying solely on how a voice sounds is a shaky foundation for a theory, especially when this show has made it clear that nothing is ever as straightforward as it seems. So while it's fun to speculate, and while the Jonah theory has definitely stirred up nostalgia for longtime Dexter fans, the evidence just doesn't hold up under close scrutiny. If anything, the misdirection proves how carefully Dexterresurrection is crafting its mystery. The real identity of the New York Ripper is meant to be a shocking curveball, not a recycled character from over a decade ago. And if episode 7 has taught us anything, it's that the voice we heard is only the beginning. The real reveal is still coming, and when it does, it won't be the obvious answer the internet has been running with. It'll be something far darker and far more unexpected. But here's where things start to get even more twisted. What if the New York Ripper isn't who we think at all? What if the real killer behind that infamous name was never Jonah Mitchell or even Prater himself, but the drunk driver who killed Prater's parents? Think about it. The show has gone out of its way to establish how Prater idolizes these kinds of monsters. He said himself that he feels more understood by the man who murdered his parents than his parents ever did. That's a chilling statement, but it also opens up a new way to read the Ripper's story. Instead of being the one who carried out the original murders, Prater may simply be the one keeping that legacy alive. This explains why Prater is the one calling victims, haunting them with the Ripper's voice, and essentially carrying on the work of his idol. He's not out there stabbing or slashing, he's orchestrating, he's manipulating, he's doing what he's always done best, creating the serial killer club and pulling strings from behind the curtain. If you go back and look, he's been very consistent about the fact that he doesn't kill. He admires, he studies, and he enables. But in his mind, keeping the Ripper's name alive by tormenting victims through phone calls could be his way of feeling like he's part of the action without ever getting blood on his own hands. But here's where it gets even darker, the weapon. We know Prater somehow got his hands on the infamous Ripper weapon, but the details of how never really added up. People online theorized he used money to get it out of evidence, but that doesn't make sense. The female cop, Claudette Wallace, clearly showed that she doesn't actually know what the weapon is, which means it couldn't have just been sitting around in storage to be bought off. So how did he get it? The most chilling answer is also the simplest. He got it directly from the killer himself. This points to the idea that the drunk driver wasn't just some reckless man who made a tragic mistake. He was a bona fide serial killer hiding behind a facade. We know he was officially charged with killing 2 people, but the way he spoke to Prater tells us he's done far more. Their conversation described deranged arrogance, the kind of coldness only a true predator carries. He admitted to Prater that he was a serial killer, and if you listen closely, you can hear that sinister conviction through Prater's perspective. It's the type of admission that doesn't come from guilt, but from pride. And that pride might explain why he passed the weapon along to Prater. If the two were as close as the show implies, it's not far-fetched to imagine him entrusting Prater with the very tool that defined his legacy. In his twisted way, it would be his way of saying, carry this on for me. And Prater, desperate for connection and validation, would gladly accept that burden. So why don't we see the Ripper now? Well, it's pretty simple, because he's dead. That's why the calls are coming from Prater and not the killer himself. It's why the Ripper isn't physically appearing in New York. Prater's not killing, but he's making sure his idol's ghost never fades. He's taunting victims, not just for their suffering, but because it makes him feel closer to the only person he ever believed understood him. Remember, this is the same guy who put together a killer meetup just to feel that connection. If he's willing to go that far, why wouldn't he torment strangers with a dead man's voice just to recapture that high? And here's the crazy part. When you listen to those recordings, the voice doesn't just sound like a distorted mystery. It actually resembles the drunk driver himself, almost as if Prater preserved it, twisted it with a voice changer, and repurposed it to keep haunting victims even after the man's death. And when you look back at that episode, it makes total sense when taking in the fact that the voice of the drunk driver was specifically not revealed and was instead murmured through Leon Prater's voice. This could have been because in that very same episode, they essentially revealed what he sounds like, which would make it too easy to connect one and one together. So if this theory holds, then the so-called New York Ripper is less about one man and more about a legacy. A killer who started it and a disturbed follower who refuses to let it die. And that makes the reveal 10 times scarier, because if Prater is the one keeping that flame alive, then the Ripper's ghost isn't going anywhere anytime soon. If you enjoyed this video and would like ad-free early access videos, please go check out my Patreon to see what interests you. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, leaving your thoughts and theories in the comments down below. Lastly, join the Discord to discuss all your favorite pieces of media. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.